Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and today we're going to take a look at the Port Adelaide Football Club and everything they've got to offer us in 2017 as far as SuperCoach goes. Now, of course, if you haven't seen any of these previews so far, it's where I take a bit of a look at not so much your obvious options or your draftees. We probably leave those a bit more to the pre-season, and everyone knows who the obvious picks are, but more your guys that should be on your radar, perhaps a breakout contender, someone who's down on their usual output, or maybe someone's coming back from a long-term injury, things like that, just guys that you should generally have on your radar. So Port Adelaide certainly offer up a few interesting options, no doubt, and I think one of the main ones, there's certainly a main two, but one that is really provoking a fair bit of interest in conversation is Hamish Hartlett. Now, of course, he's known for his injuries and his good ball use, which is an awkward combination, but he is now a defender. He has had that status before, and a lot of people benefited from that for a short period of time. From memory, he did cop one of his typical injuries after averaging around 100 for the first part of the season. But he's priced pretty nicely, which I think that brings him into contention, and certainly one to consider. I think if he was priced around your 90 or 95, you'd really get a little uneasy about selecting a guy who's so prone to injury. But the fact that he's priced at $423,000 after averaging 77.9 last year, he is definitely one that we should be looking at for our backlines. Now, of course, you don't get dual position for nothing. They don't pick it out of a hat. He did play a lot more in the backline last year, and of course that did affect his scoring output. Now, I'll reel off the positives about Hamish. Firstly, he's a known scorer, and he's a guy that has a fair bit of flair. Port Adelaide like the ball in his hands. He's no stranger to averages in the 90s, and even a three-figure one. Averages since 2011, 92.2 in 2011. I'll also read out the games, just the 16, and working our way back to the present, 91.4 and 15 games, 90.8 and 20, 97.3 and 19, 101.1 and 22 games in 2015. So certainly that season a couple of years back was a clear sample of what he can produce when he does get a full season together. The 22 games there averaged 101.1, so he can certainly score when he's out in the park. What concerns me is that he is prone to injury. I mean, not extremely bad. I mean, his last 3 years, of course last year only played the 15, but from 13 to 15 he played 20, 19 and 22 games. So it's not like he's having enormous injuries that are keeping him out for massive chunks of the season. He is just prone to these little niggles where he misses a game or two, whether it be a calf or a hammy, and of course last year after round 19 he didn't play a game with a calf injury. So he's very prone to that, and guys like that just seem to always miss 1 or 2 games. Now, we can live with that if he's going to produce 95 plus. And of course, as I always say, watch his pre-season closely. Some it's more relevant than others, and Hartlett is right at the top of that list as far as relevancy when it comes to his pre-season, because if he can have a good pre-season, then you can certainly lock and load him with a fair bit of confidence. He'll be at a bargain price for what he can produce, and I think, if he gets his body right, then he's shown that he can play around your 20 games consistently, and that's a fair trade-off. We can definitely work with that, we can live with that. So he misses the odd game or two, you've got a defender who's averaging 97, 98. Potentially he could average even more. The downside to Hartlett and the concern is that obviously he picked up the defender status with a bit of a change in his role, and that was obviously going down back. Now, last year he did miss a few games from time to time, and of course missed the last, I think, 4 to 5 weeks with that calf injury. But he didn't set the world on fire with the new role as far as scoring. Minimal tons, I think it was about 3 or 4, and just not fantastic scores. So he didn't really have any games that plummeted that average. There weren't too many injury-affected games. The odd 1 or 2, but nothing drastic. There's no way you can turn a 78 average into 90 just by taking a few games out here and there. He simply didn't have a very good season. Was that because of his role? Was that just a poor season? That's something we're going to have to take a real look at now. Obviously, we don't get a stack of Port Adelaide games put on TV over here in Victoria. I unfortunately do not have Foxtel, so I'm not going to sit here and say that I saw exactly every game and how the role changed his output. Other fans who see South Australian footy a bit more will probably know more than me, but no doubt it affected him. He may have just had a down year as well. At this stage, I'm probably leaning towards yes in regards to taking him. I'll have to be, assured a little bit through the pre-season that he's, of course, his body is going well, but also that he's getting a little bit of midfield time, and if he's not, that he's the clear guy out of the back line to be having the ball in hand alongside Pittard. So I think it's important that he's the main man somewhere. He offers class wherever he is. He's a great ball user, so I think it's important that we can identify that. And if we do, we could certainly have an extremely good defender, definitely a top 8 defender, and we can get him for less than 430. So that's a recipe for success, but he comes with risk, no doubt. The second man that on the Port Adelaide list that has certainly caused a fair bit of discussion, probably the most, is Paddy Ryder. Now, of course, we all know the story. Banned last year. Made the move basically because of the Essendon saga. His wife was furious, demanded that they move clubs. Paddy, of course, found his way there. His departure last year certainly affected our Supercoach sides indirectly with, of course, Matthew Lobbe probably going to get a bit more time, which he did. He just didn't use it. Now, he burnt us a lot. Can a new Port Adelaide ruckman do us a few favours this time around? I'll run through a few pros and cons, but I am leaning towards no for Paddy. I've seen him in quite a few sides, so it's certainly worth discussing. Now, off the top, you can get him at 418,000, and as I've alluded to, he's a ruck forward option, which we seem to fall in love with, which I don't understand, but I will get to. Now, his averages, he's shown that he can be there and abouts any given time, capable of good averages, but also more than capable of averages in the late 80s. From 2011, 90.9, 105.5 in 2012 is his career best, 90.2, 101.1, and in 2015 just 85.4, where he really struggled to work his way into not the side at Port Adelaide, but just find his role and didn't seem to flourish like some recruits do. Now, he did really struggle to make an impact early, and basically him and Lobbe did not work together. It wasn't a great combination. Neither player really benefited from it. So, of course, we know that Lobbe is looking to get back to his best. He had a shocking year last year. Where does he stand in regards to the Port Adelaide list? I'm not too sure. What we're going to have to look out for with Ryder is where his exact role is, because historically he's a ruckman who doesn't ruck all day, but is more than capable of going forward. And he'll give you your goal a game, your 10 to 13 touches, your 20 odd hit-outs, lays the odd tackle, takes a good mark. He can quite easily average around the 90, as those averages suggest. I do have queries on him, the fact that he has missed a year, he's another year older, he hasn't played competitive footy at that standard for some time. Is he going to be sharing the ruck load? Because of course his numbers as a bomber are impressive. I mean, they're 4 years, 90 plus, 2 of them 3 figures. Very impressive. But the fact is, we've only got 1 year to sample of him in Port Adelaide colours, and they weren't impressive. He didn't fit the mould very well, averaged 85.4. Is that going to be what he produces as a Port Adelaide player? Is he just going to not quite get the same opportunity and share it a little bit with Charlie Dixon, play a little bit more second fiddle up forward? Will he just average 90 odd? Now, that's definitely something that could happen. I don't see him absolutely exploding and averaging 100. I like his price for sure. He's the sort of guy you could pick up at a nice little bargain in perhaps your Supercoach draft. But the other reason that I'll talk about that I aren't fully sold on him is just the fact that we get so excited about ruck forward options, and I just don't know why. Now, of course, I know the reason. It's to swap a ruckman and a forward dual position. We all know that. But why does your ruckman have to be ruck forward? I think, of course, it's important to have the option to swing a forward like your Kurt Tippett into the ruck, but I don't think it's overly necessary. A lot of the times we will see your R3 player as a dual position like your Mason Cox, and you can swing them round, no dramas. That's fine. I mean, that's fantastic. But I don't think there's any great need just because he's a ruck forward to bank on him. I think the real consideration and the real things you've got to take into account is what is he going to average, because most people are going to have Gawn or Goldstein at number 1, and if you then pick Ryder, you're basically saying, well, I believe he's going to average upward of 95 and I can then upgrade him halfway through the season or something, which, mind you, if we're talking that theory of a mid-price and a stepping stone to a premium, then 420k is pretty expensive as far as that goes. If you're going to go that way, you rather look at a Giles or a Sandilands or something like that. And I think if you're picking him solely because you think he's at a good price and he's going to average well, that's just damn stupid. I mean, he's not going to average in the top 4 rucks as far as I'm concerned, and you should be looking to get 2 of the top 3. I mean, ideally you get the top 2, but I just don't think there's any great need to be, having that swing factor of 2 ruck forward options in your ruck department. I mean, we're all going to have an R3 that's probably going to be a non-playing ruck forward, and I just think it's more important to snap up the points, bank your points in your first 2 ruck divisions, and then look, if they get injured, you trade them. At least they're good scorers, they'll be expensive, you can just trade them for another gun. I think it's a waste of a position to pick a guy who you feel will probably average less, but worst case scenario, he's dual position. It's just a bit of insurance, really. I mean, it's planning for the worst, when I'd rather go, well, look, I reckon this guy can go bang, average 105 to 110. Hell, if he gets injured after 8 rounds, that's a bugger, but he's averaged 107. He's still priced around 600, 550. Yes, I got to waste a trade, but I don't lose out too much. I can just trade him off to another gun. I don't think it's super necessary. Certainly, by all means, if you're a fan of Tom Boyd, chuck him in your forward line, have him as a backup. I just don't think there's a need to have too many dual position players and sacrificing points for what is just basically insurance. So that's probably one for another video, to be honest. I got a little bit off topic there, but nonetheless, I just don't think Ryder is a fantastic option. I don't think he's cheap enough. I don't think he's convinced us enough as a Port Adelaide player. He hasn't showed a big enough ceiling to be picked as a keeper, so he's not ticking enough boxes for me, to be honest. Now, I'll let you guys discuss that one. Certainly throw me a few comments if you disagree, because I know he has been a pretty popular player. Another guy we'll take a look at is Chad Wingard, 440k in your forward line. He's destined to be a superstar, Chad, isn't he? He's a gun. I'm very much looking into him. I think he's an extremely talented player. We all know that. The one big question mark on him is, can he go into the midfield? Will he play more midfield minutes? I think when he does, that is when we'll see Chad Wingard really explode, not only in the competition, but SuperCoach points. Averaged 80.8 last year. Had a bit of a trouble with injury. I think he got concussed. I think it was early in the year. I think he got concussed, and hamstring injury really destroyed him later in the year. Scored 32 points in round 21, and also had an injury-affected game in round 2 where he went off after about half the game. Now, he's shown that he can score big numbers in the past. 2013, 98.6. Dropped that back down to about 80 in 2014, 97.8 in 2015. So I think the question mark surrounding him is midfield minutes. That's definitely what's required for him to consistently bump it up. He showed that he loves a big moment, lifts in the big games, loves a goal, sort of the man who's always in the right places. He's a footballer and is not afraid of the stage, which is important, and I think he gets plenty of big points when he plays a good game. I just think when he has quiet ones, they're very quiet because he has played more forward. So I just think if he can work his way into the midfield a little bit, we'll sort of see his poorer games, instead of being 60s, they'll be 80s, just because you get a couple more tackles, or you get a little bit more cheap ball in the midfield. You're just around the game a bit more. So I think that'll be key to his development. How possible is that? I think definitely very possible. Monfrey's returns, and as I said, Ryder, they're 2 players who'll play in the forward line and add a bit of potency to the Port Adelaide attack, which will mean Wingard will probably get the chance to play a bit higher. And just the fact that Port Adelaide's midfield is crying out for class, and Wingard, he is class. He lives and breathes it. Their midfield, Ebert, Boak, Pollock, Sam Gray, Hartlett, who I mentioned before, Ollie Wines, they're all good footballers, some of them pushing A grade, but they don't have class and zip and that real match-winning ability. Robbie Gray does, no doubt about that. He's a superstar. But I think definitely when they sit down and Kenny Hinkley has a look at the board, they want Wingard in the heart of the contest and around the ball as much as they can. So, and I was reading something, maybe Justin Westhoff speaking to the media, and he did say, I think this is December or something, that certainly they'll look to attend to their attack formation and the forward line set up. And he did sort of hint that, you know, guys like your wing guards, etc., could get more opportunity through the midfield as the likes of Monfree's return. So it's always one of those things that's on the cards, a bit like Isaac Heaney, who I'll discuss in the Sydney preview. They're guys who almost do their apprenticeship off a half-forward flank, and when they do burst in the midfield, they dominate. And I think it's all about pinpointing when that actually happens. You know, he's well priced, $440,000. We know he's a superstar in the waiting, and he's had great seasons as a forward. But I just think to really bank on him, we need to see midfield minutes. I am not a big fan of picking your sort of small half-forward flank guys as keepers. So just to convince me and you in the Supercoach world, I definitely think that we need to see a bit more midfield rotation for Chad. That's probably about all for Port Adelaide. I think there are quite a few guys who will provoke, or get a bit of interest, no doubt, and provoke discussion. Robbie Gray, priced at $588,000 after averaging 108. Is he capable of pushing up to 115? I think probably not. He's not the worst selection. He's dynamic. I think he can definitely up that average by a few points per game. I don't quite see him going extreme to the 115 because at times he will get tagged and he will throw in your odd 50 to 60. I don't think he's an absolute lock as far as premiums go. I think he is in the elite of the competition, and if you want to go point of difference, well, it's certainly not beyond him to average 112, which you'd be pretty happy with. But having said that, he could just as well average 106, 107. So just see how he's tracking. Jasper Pittard averaged 91.8 last year, I think it was. He's priced a touch under 500k. I wouldn't be picking him, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he marginally improves his average. He could push up to around your 95 because they like the ball in his hands. He's starting to use it a bit better now too, and I think that's important when you're that ball user from defence because they certainly like giving it to him. I wouldn't be looking at him as a super coach option though, to be honest. I just don't think that's too relevant personally. But that's about a wrap up for the Port Adelaide Footy Club. Certainly a few options to throw around and get us thinking at this stage of the year. Let me know your thoughts on any Port Adelaide players you've got, and I'm always interested to hear those. If you enjoyed the video, by all means give it a like. If you're enjoying what I'm doing, certainly check out the other previews and things like that. We're working our way through every club. And of course, give a subscribe. Starting to get a few more on board, a few in the last couple of weeks, which is great. It'd be fantastic to sort of push up around that 400 mark. And as you probably tell, I always reply to the comments left on each video, so certainly feel free to get involved. You'll get a reply, whether it's on the night or next week. I always look to get around to it when I get a moment. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you soon.